from 8 o'clock, and it's the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160. Mr. Bob Pollock is with us. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. You can get in touch with us by calling 479-1160 or 349-WCCS if you have a question for Bob. And I understand Mr. Old Facebook is up there as well. If you want to write to us on Facebook as you're watching Bob blending into the background, then you can do that. And we'll ask the question that way. How are you?
Good. How are you today?
Wonderful. I wanted to ask you about spotted lanternfly. Are we seeing them in Indiana County?
I haven't had any official reports of that yet.
Okay.
I'm curious myself.
Yeah.
As to whether anybody's seen any yet.
I'm curious as to whether there are so many different looks. When you Google pictures of spotted lanternfly, they change their appearance so often that maybe people don't even recognize them.
Well, that's possible. And they're going to be smaller now because they'll be in the early stages after hatching from the egg masses. So yes, they'll be young, they'll be small, they'll be crawling around though. So I mean, if they're around, you should probably start to see them or notice them, that it might be a little bit different looking creature than you've seen around before.
Now, what kind of plants are they going to favor? Where are you going to be? There's one particular one that they're after that we don't want that plant around anyway, right?
Right, tree of heaven.
The tree of heaven, yeah. That's an invasive plant with an invasive insect.
It is. But yes, 2 for 1 there. And in the early, but that's a very key one, although they will get on other things. Of course, they'll get on grapevines. So if you have a grape arbor, or a grape planting, then that's a good place to go and start to look for them because they'll be attracted to that and the tree of heaven.
Blueberry bushes?
Not so much berry bushes, but you still could, depending on if the population's higher, then you may see them everywhere. Yeah. And on other tree species as well. And the early stage nymphs will be the black color. That would just be like a shiny black with all these white spots on them. And they won't be perfectly round dots or anything, but they're polka dotted essentially. But
size of a fingernail,
they're about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch.
They're tiny, tiny.
They're tiny.
Yeah.
And then the next stage, when they molt, then they'll start adding that red into the pattern on their body. And then they'll bump up in size up to a 1/2 an inch in size. Okay. They'll be much more noticeable at that point, I think.
Yeah.
But right now they'll be fairly small and black, and there'll be a beetle, and they'll be with a hard shell with the white polka dots.
Noticing some strange-looking insects here this spring, and including a bee. It looks like a bumblebee, but it's got an extended body on it, a little bit longer. I've got some of those out around the house. It's not exactly a murder hornet, but it's bigger than your average bumblebee, but it's the same color scheme.
Is the abdomen or the back end of the body, is that
like a separate
wider
section?
Yeah, separate section, but is it wide or is it really narrow?
It's wide and tapers.
Okay.
So that's not one I've seen before. But that's the way insects go. Sometimes you see things you've never seen before.
That's right. There's a lot of different ones out there.
Like the Pirates game the other day. Things you've never seen before happen in those games, and they happen out in your garden as well. Okay, so let's talk about out there in the garden and what's going on out there, because we've had some extra hot weather. This weekend we're going to have some extra cool weather for this time of the year, and then the hot stuff comes back. In terms, I know we talk about how the weather and the winds and everything can really affect what is touching your garden, what's really affecting the way the plants grow. I'm not guessing hot, cold, hot is the way that you want to go when you're growing a garden.
Yeah, it's you tend to stress the plants either way, and then if we have enough moisture, that's one thing. If we're on the drier side and we get the real hot snap, But that'll dry things out in a hurry too, where we've had ample moisture and then we get those 90-degree days with the sun out all day and get a little breeze in there with that.
And right now it's been a while since we had a soaking rain too.
It has been. Yeah. So we're starting to, the top of the ground's getting dry now. It could even be getting hard as well, just because it was wet earlier, and then when it tends to dry out, it can get a little crunchy on top. Now that can be a problem. Let's say you had made a seeding within the last week. You can get that when that soil dries out, or it almost gets baked on top. You can get crusting that occurs that can impede those seeds from germinating, or make it a lot tougher for them to germinate up through that hard crust on top. So you might need to check that, loosen up the soil if things aren't germinating like you think they should be, and they should be coming up fairly quickly with the soil temperatures and air temperatures the way they've been recently. Germination should be pretty quick, as long as there's ample moisture in the ground for that seed to imbibe that and then start the process of germination and growth. So that's something to check. And you may need to just loosen up the soil a little bit around plants so that when you do water or we do get some rain, that soaks in better versus running off, especially if the ground got crusted. And sometimes when we overwork the soil, we make it too fine. It's more susceptible to that crusting on top. So it's best not to overwork it, but sometimes that happens.
All of that. I noted we really did a extra work on the fence around the garden this year to keep the varmints out. I noted that my entire bean row was wiped out over the course of about a week by somebody who got in. I don't know what the bunnies figured out. I can jump over that fence because I know they're not getting under it. So somehow or other they're getting in there, and it's driving me nuts because I want beans this year. But those sorts of things, we think of natural or maybe even other ways to prevent critters from getting into your gardens and eating up your stuff. And I know Extension sometimes puts out hints about things to do, but it's awful difficult to keep the varmints out, isn't it?
It is, and they learn too what works and what doesn't work. Or they'll test things, and if they don't get, if we don't we have a fence, but we don't electrify the fence, well then it's just the wire there, and then there's no deterrent really, unless they physically can't get through it or under it. But if we add electricity to that fencing system, that can be all it takes then they do that once, get jolted, and then they move on. Sometimes they go right through it.
Yeah.
But that happens. But it seems like we always have to change, and different things, repellents are a good example of that. We have to change those up, because you can read a bunch of options, but some of those options might work. They might work for a while, and then until they don't work. Human hair.
I was just thinking of human hair.
Great, good example. Because there's a fragrance or an odor to that hair that can signal a human to an animal, so stay away. Sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. And of course, that scent that's there will fade out over time, so you have to replace it. But that in itself can work for a while. But if the urge to eat that crop is greater than what they feel the risk is,
their fear factor.
Yeah, the fear factor. It may not work anymore.
Granddad used aluminum
because nothing
pipe.
Else happens to support, or back up the claim that, hey, you don't want to go here.
Granddad used aluminum pie plates.
Yeah.
And they would bang off the stick, and he thought that would work. And then I noticed one year that he had the radio playing 24 hours a day. He was putting on a dance basically out there for them. He had it on a talk station actually, so that they were hearing talk all the time, so that the bunnies would think, oh wait, there's a guy there. wait a second, I know that guy. I know that song. But whatever he could do to try to keep them out, traps, all of those sorts of things, the poison pellets, whatever it happened to be. People have tried a variety of methods, and if the animal's hungry, the animal's going to eat.
And there's and you talk about sounds. There's all kind of distress calls. There's also you can buy systems that have a lot of different animal sounds. So the predator prey.
IRMC does it with to keep the birds from doing poo-poo on people's cars. They have predator bird sounds that come out of the speakers on the light poles.
Yeah. So those are all examples. Inflatable creatures are used as well. They'll put air in them. And then and then they'll let the air out, and it's that the movement combination of the movement and sounds. There's guns that will go off, cannons. You can get use a propane tank and hook that up to a cannon, and that will generate a boom on a cycle. You can speed up the cycle, you can lengthen the cycle. They'll do that especially for birds, like in sweet corn and in other crops where the birds are coming in to peck the tips of the ears or damage the crop.
The plastic owls are out there.
Yeah, plastic owls.
The rubber snakes.
That's predator prey. So there's a lot of different things. And a lot of those things have worked until, again, they don't work. And then you've got to switch up. It's time to change and do something different to shake things up a bit. But, in the long run, fencing really has been a pretty reliable system. Now, maybe something's flying in and took your beans versus going through.
You think so?
I don't know for sure. It's just,
there's no bird out there that says, "Hey, look, green bean plants."
Well, sometimes, and the crows and
they wiped out the beets too. 2 years in a row on the beets.
So now you need a fence in a fence. So now you need to take like chicken wire and make a little tent down the row of beans.
I was thinking about that.
To protect those because they seem to be more vulnerable.
I replanted seed last weekend. And so when that comes up, maybe that's the next step, huh?
Yeah. Yep.
It's the only way it's going to work.
Might be the only way it's going to work.
All right. Well, I don't think we solved anything here, but we took a shot at it. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160.